Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Quincy Show with Joe, Part 3. It's been a while since we had one of these, so I'm thankful that you're all watching. This one is about the recent events in Quincy High School, North Quincy High School, one of our middle schools, with the walkout in response to a couple terribly racist videos that circulated. And I'd like to just start off by saying this is a sensitive issue. I'm going to be critical of the mayor, but I know everyone struggles with these issues. It's not easy, and so I want to keep that in mind as we talk about the mayor's response, particularly his opening comments in his podcast that happened right after the events a couple weeks ago. I want to start off by talking about that. Listen, the elephant in the room is that no region in our country is free from racism. And the Northeast especially has its own brand that we have to address. It's different than how it is in other parts of the country, but it's no better. And if you want to look to a tangible example, look at the Torrey Hunter Boston Red Sox issues of last year, where the Red Sox, to their credit, actually came out with a statement, acknowledging that people of color, whether they be players, staff, coaches, have been treated at times poorly over the years at Boston, at Fenway Park, and so they came out and acknowledged it, and that's how you start to get past these issues. And I think that's what Quincy needs to do as well.
Okay, so what you're going to hear is the mayor's podcast with Mark Carey. It's called City View, I think, with the mayor.
There is a lot of Christmas stuff. We're going to talk about that next, but we really want to just to go in and talk, Mayor, about what happened last week, or really what happened a year ago that happened last week with the school department, and there was a racist issue, a racism issue that happened.
Yeah. First of all, let me say, the school, first of all, we have an excellent school system, really outstanding, that really focuses on every individual's needs, every family's needs. It's about a little less than 10,000 students in our school system. We have 2 high schools and 5 middle schools and 11 elementary schools, special ed center. Spectacular staff, leaders, teachers. And let me first say, as I always say, that 99.9% of the kids go to school and do the right thing. And if you talk to anybody in the corporate world, public sector, use a number, right? They'll all say 90% of the people are never a problem, do the right thing, go to work, get their job done, go home, blah, blah. But there's always a percentage of people that seem to have trouble either abiding by the rules or doing what they need to do, doing the right thing. So,
and that's always been the case.
So here we go. This is why I brought up the Red Sox earlier. The mayor is really being defensive. He's defending the school system, the city. He's saying that most people do the right thing, that there's really not a big problem here, that we're all judging the system based off a few bad apples. And the Red Sox could have done that. They could have said, well, this is just a few fans out of the millions that come here every year. We really don't have a big problem. But they didn't, because it's 2021, and that's not the way you handle these issues anymore. And I think the mayor should think about that. To get past these problems, you have to acknowledge them.
And that's always been the case, but now we have social media. It's a different world.
Okay, and this is the other thing that's going to happen a lot. We're going to make a subplot here that social media and technology, smartphones and the like, are part of the problem.
Will be the case. That's correct. That's correct. So now you take the school system that we have today, and I'm going to use a little bit of, I'm going to throw out a little bit of my thoughts in general, society, right? Stuff we're experiencing nationally in the last few years. And perhaps there's a lot of various reasons for it, but I'm going to tell you what I think what's happening is this country is losing its soul. And this country was based on very basic Christian Judeo values. At the end of the day, it comes down to the golden rule. Now, whether you're a Jew, Christian, Catholic, Protestant, Muslim, Buddhist, at the end of the day, each of those religions teach the golden rule. Do unto others that you do to yourself. I mean, it comes in very different forms, very different ways. But, and certainly in my case, your case, Catholic Christians, You can talk about the Sermon on the Mount. You can talk about, and I said this recently in a meeting, if you don't want to recognize Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, recognize him as a historical figure, because he was a historical figure.
You said that at a meeting? What meeting? Why? Why would you ever say that at a meeting? I don't get
Figure. And when he was asked one time, it's in the scripture, what is the greatest commandment? He said, love your God with all your heart, your soul, and your strength. But close to that, right next to that, is to love one another. How hard is that?
As yourself.
Oh boy. So the mayor is now firmly on his soapbox, and he's acting like that uncle at the Thanksgiving dinner table, opining about what's wrong with society. To put it another way, he's watching a lot of commercials about buying gold. He's kind of regurgitating a lot of talking points from a certain political viewpoint. They're widely discredited. I remember being in the 80s hearing about how the problem with today's youth is that there's not enough religion, that we've gotten away from our faith and stuff. It's really tired. See, I also want to point out that the Golden Rule's been around for a really long time, as the mayor points out, in many faith traditions. So the Golden Rule was there in 1619 when people started enslaving Africans. It was there in the 18th century when 6 or 7 million Africans were kidnapped and brought here. It was there before the Civil War, after the Civil War, through all sorts of incarnations of legal and illegal forms of discrimination up until today. So it's kind of flippant to just say if everyone would just do what we've learned in church, we wouldn't have these problems. On one level, it's probably true, but on another level, you're sort of talking backwards, because you're saying we've gotten away from our faith tradition. But when were we with our faith tradition if we were mistreating people all this time?
How does as yourself?
We've complicated. So as many people have gotten away from faith in general, what's the core? What's the foundation they're living with? And I would suggest that, it's really starts at your home, and whatever that faith values are, that kind of helps to build you the person that you are. So if you take out the faith piece, right, it's a major piece some people don't experience anymore. Then you add into that the households that have changed, the families of today aren't all perfect. And, we could talk about till the lights come on, I guess, the street lights come on. You can talk about all kinds of societal ills that may contribute to the demise of the family, et cetera, et cetera. But family today is different. And there's a lot of kids that don't get the support and structure at home. So now add that piece in, right? So if you get a kid coming from a house that doesn't have a good support system, doesn't have any real faith base, whatever that faith may be, now you're out there loosey-goosey in the society of today that we're living with, and some of these kids have no direction. So let me say right up front that most of the kids do the right thing every day, but the burden of...
So the mayor is trying to have this two ways. He's trying to say that we have turned away from faith, that the country has lost its soul.
That households have changed, the demise of the family unit, the lack of support and structure at home, the lack of faith.
General loosey-goosiness. At the same time, claim that 99.9% of everyone is doing fine, and that it's just a few knuckleheads. So it's not really a consistent argument.
Every day. But the burden on the school system today is so much more than it was 30 or 40 years ago, because most of the kids coming to school 30 or 40 years ago, had structure at home, had support at home, had direction at home, and had the reinforcement of whatever that religious faith may be. And I think, and I know there's probably people out there right now rolling their eyes, and here he goes, But there's truth to that, and how do you slice this? Now you add that all up today, and we deal with issues, and this social media stuff is out of control. The iPhone, whatever the device you may use, it's a tool that has had some great advantages for society, but comes with it some great ills that has, I think, really contributed to some major issues. And
No, I don't have snap face, so don't do it.
Mr. Mayor, come back to us. This tangent is wild. Counterpoint. Perhaps it's not that we are drifting away from faith, or that social media exists, or that smartphones exist. Perhaps it's just that racism exists. We wouldn't be alone as a society. We wouldn't be alone as a community here in Massachusetts, in New England, in America, in the world, in having to acknowledge and take steps to alleviate it.
You know, back in school, when we were in school, Mark, and you could probably speak to it better than I, but a kid could get beat up in a schoolyard or something. There was a fist fight, and then that was the end of it. This bullying that goes on social media, now you see a kid that doesn't get invited to a party. He sees the party on the video, and all of a sudden that person's all upset, and it creates all these issues. Now I'm getting a little off course, but my point is that society today is very different than the one we knew. And the pressure on schools now to be everything, to be teachers and guidance counselors and nurses and mothers and fathers, it's tough. It's challenging.
Right.
It's difficult. So,
well, I agree with a lot of this. I mean, it is hard to be a teacher these days, or probably ever. And I think it's great that the mayor recognizes the damage that bullying can cause, whether it's online or in person. So, no qualms with what he's saying here. I just still think we're off topic.
Difficult. So, I think that we got to keep that in mind, that most of the kids do the right thing every day. They go to school, they do their studies, they join the band or a club after school, or they're playing a sport, and, you know, we don't hear from them. It's when you have the screw-ups. I've said in the past about these racist issues, it could be ignorance, it could be mental illness, it could be evil. I mean, but I would contribute most of this, because of the age group, to ignorance. And once you make a little video and you put it out there, it's out there forever.
Forever.
And these kids do not understand the implications and the consequences that has for them, for their life, when they go looking for a job down the road. So,
all right, so there's a lot of repeat here. What we're adding here is we're seeing the mayor start to, repeat about how these videos can come back to haunt the makers of the video later. But we're getting away from the immediate problem, which is the racism is causing hurt today to the people who are recipients of that type of hate and discrimination. And again, it's still there without the video. The video just shines a light on it and lets people see it for themselves. But even if you're not making a video, the hate affects them whether or not they hit record on their phone or not.
So I don't think, I'm not a believer that Quincy Public Schools is systemically racist. It's not. We have one of the most diverse populations in the state. They come from all over, heavily Asian, Eastern European, you name it. We've got it all here. And I said to somebody recently, before COVID hit, then all of a sudden, I'm not saying there weren't issues, but publicly, you didn't hear about any of these issues. Right. There's always...
Whether or not we have a diverse student population is irrelevant to whether or not we could be systemically racist. It's like saying, I have a black friend, so I can't be racist. You sure can. The students are the ones talking and trying to ask for assistance. And that's really what we're not talking about so far in this podcast. Also, he's so close to saying that this is a COVID problem. Like, we never heard about these problems before COVID. And he kind of backs away from saying that, but don't be silly.
About any of these issues. Right. There's always going to be these issues because you can't cure it. You can't cure ignorance.
You can fix ignorance, though. You just need to educate and have dialogue and discussion. I mean, that's how you fix ignorance. I mean, it's one of the ones you can work on. Right? Yes.
There's always going to be somebody to screw up. Unfortunately, today the screw ups are so evident and they're all over the press that it's not something you can just move on from so easily. So don't judge the school system based on some individuals. And
So
I wanna
now,
say that.
in speaking to, so that's a good setup for what actually did happen. There was a video.
Okay, the mayor is now 7 minutes into his podcast, and we still have not talked about what the events that transpired were. And so 7 minutes so far have just been about why there's nothing wrong.
There was a video that was put out, a very racist video by a kid about a year ago, correct? About a year ago, and then
Well, there's a couple of things that have gone on, Mark. So there was a video a couple of weeks ago that was derogatory toward North Quincy High School from a Quincy High kid, and singled out kids. It was the language was not good, very offensive, and not good at all in nature. And then last week or so, we had a video that popped that supposedly a freshman at Quincy High School resurfaced. That's the point. Made a video a year and a half or 2 years ago while he's in middle school, and it resurfaced. And the kid, that's the other thing. Before we judge everybody, we don't know what your heart is. We don't know what's in your heart. These kids do some stupid things. Growing up, we all did some stupid things. So that video got out there. And then in school, a kid went after him and had a physical fight in the hallway. So that was videoed by some kids, and that was put up on social media. All of a sudden, it seems like we have anarchy in the school system.
Yeah.
And that's not true.
Okay, so a minute later, you heard about everything up until the walkout. It's just an imbalance. What happened versus spin.
And that's not true.
Right.
We have issues. There'll always be issues. We're an urban district. And I don't care whether you're a rural district. There's always issues. It's human nature. There's human flaws. And I think that this system has responded quite well overall in handling these issues. There's no cure for it. People want to say, well, do this or do that. We got to have a more loving environment. We're doing all those things. But there's always going to be screw-ups. I don't care. We can talk about, we've dismissed teachers. We've dismissed firefighters and police officers because they were screw-ups. That it happens in life. And, at that young age, and with all they got going on in the world and all the temptations and all the challenges these kids face, it's a surprise we don't have more of that. So I want to put that out there first and foremost, that the Quincy Public Schools does it well. We teach the kids, we embrace the kids, their families, their challenges, and their needs.
Awesome, yeah.
We're not perfect.
Right.
Nobody is.
And then, of course, the kids decided to sort of do a walkout. They did a march, and they actually were very peaceful, and they all ended up, I went down there and talked to a couple of them. They were all really nice kids, and they did their civic duty, and they marched, and they came back, and then they went back to school, or some of them went home. But still, they did that, and that was that was the end, really, right?
Yep. No, and some of them were probably well-intentioned, sincere. Some were along for the ride. I'll get out of class. Think of the age group, right?
Yeah, I know.
So this was striking to me because the media director, Mark, I think does a really nice job summarizing what the students did in response to the racist videos and the fight. They walked out and they made it clear that something's got to be done. We're not being listened to. And I think the mayor demonstrates throughout this podcast that they're not being listened to. He's shown here that he doesn't like the walkout. He called it unproductive in the press right afterwards. So he's proving their point that he's not listening. And ironically, I think their behavior by walking out peacefully, and they actually proved that there's a lot right with our school system. These kids exercising democracy, I should say, and standing up for their fellow students, whether or not they were students of color in the walkout or allies of those students of color. I was proud of them. And I think the mayor should have been too.
Age group, right?
Yeah,
I
know.
mean, and I'm not judging. I'm just
No,
saying
of course
that's
not.
part of growing up, right?
Yeah.
So, a point was made, and we discuss those issues.
Yep.
We make adjustments, and we move on.
Sure.
I don't want to continue to beat the dead horse, as they say.
Okay.
That's not
Yeah.
productive. So we still have some work to do, but I think that overall, it's a damn good city and a damn good school system. Why are people who are minorities moving here.
The city has so much to offer. And, the folks that have been here for a long time, sometimes we forget and take for granted what we have here in the city of Quincy and the services that we have and everything else. But it's a great city.
The other thing that people should be mindful of is that this is a unique nation. There's no other nation in the history of the world that has done what we've done. We're a nation of immigrants. And, you got all kinds of different cultures, languages coming in, mixed in. And we, what? It works. We have issues from time to time, absolutely, but it works. And in many parts of the world, it would not work. In fact, that's why we have strife and political issues and violence in a lot of these other countries, because they're fighting over, whatever religious sect they are or tribe they are. And it's crazy. It's crazy. So we got to keep in mind, this is a great nation. We're going through some challenges. We're not nearly as bad as some people describe. And I would suggest it's very popular in the media today that we focus on the negativity. We focus on the cynicism when there's so much more good going out there we should be focusing on. And I'm not saying we ignore the issues. That's not what I'm saying.
Nope.
We deal with issues every time they come up. We hit them head on, make adjustments as needed. But we're not going to change the world because of a few idiots. It just, people make bad decisions sometimes. That doesn't mean we throw out the baby with the bathwater.
It sounds like you're finding the hope, which I agree. I always look for the hope. Find the hope.
Indeed.
There's always hope.
Most people are good.
There
Even
are.
these kids that screw up,
I know.
they're probably good kids. They just screw up.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Yes, of course. So let's just switch and shift gears. I just wanted to ask you about that briefly because we haven't talked about it.
Okay, I'm going to ignore a lot of that. But I did want to point out one thing, that about a year ago, the city council, among other people, asked the mayor to consider appointing a director of a new social justice department. And I'm just trying to think of how the last month would have played out differently had we had a trained professional help us facilitate these discussions, our response. Maybe we wouldn't have these tone-deaf podcast filibusters. Maybe someone would have been educating the staff about how these issues should be addressed. Maybe there would have been people that made the kids feel more heard. Just a thought. But when we talked about having that department, the mayor pretty much said he didn't think it was necessary. He was asking, where in Quincy do we need these things? Point to it. Well, the kids are pointing to it now. One more thing. Last year, there was a reckoning in the country about violence against people who were in police custody, people of color especially. And there were protests around the country, including Quincy. And the people who were going to attend these protests never expected trouble. We kind of just knew it was going to be a peaceful event, and we knew we weren't there to be at war with anybody. We were there to show solidarity. But there was a police presence that I've not seen in the city before then. There was storefronts boarded up, National Guard, 150 police officers from different organizations. So somebody thought there was going to be trouble. Even an abundance of caution doesn't call for that much presence. So when we say we don't have these troubles in Quincy, I think we should think about that, because somebody must think we have the potential for these problems in Quincy, because they were overly prepared at the cost of taxpayers to basically provide a very forbidding presence at what was a very peaceful protest. There was, I think, about 4 events put on by people in Quincy, and I think 4 for 4 were peaceful and pretty eventless. So, worth thinking about. So I hope it makes more sense as to why I started this episode with the statement from the Red Sox last year, because I think there's a lot of similarities here. You have a proud organization like the Red Sox, and you have a proud city and school system like Quincy, and neither one of them is that comfortable with the racist label. Who is? But the Red Sox realized, and it took them a little while, that the way to confront these problems, the way to get past them, is to acknowledge that there is a problem. And that way you can start to fix it. And I think we're there in Quincy. I think the mayor has to realize that that is how Quincy gets past these issues and really lives up to the ideals that he seems to want for it. The Red Sox end their statement from last year with the following: "True change starts from within, and as we identify how we can do better, please know we are listening. We hear you and we believe you." That's about it. Sorry this went on a little longer than I wanted it to, but it was about a 15-minute part of the podcast, so there was a lot to cover. I appreciate anyone who watched this, especially if you watched it beginning to end. And look for more stuff to come soon. Bye-bye.